Hi, I'm Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
All right, here we go. We're live in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everybody. Here we are at the humble Gamekeeper
Christmas time.
Podcast studio.
Is that Caledonia?
That would be correct.
That is Caledonia.
Yeah, that's Richie's school there. He's the
Nice.
voice of the Caledonia.
Of the Cavaliers.
Yeah, that's the
Give us a first and 10.
First and 10, Caledonia.
There it is, right
All
there.
right.
That's pretty
Man,
good.
they get their money's worth out of it.
That's why I'm free.
Yeah. Well, so we're right here on the, this is Christmas is approaching.
Right.
It's a big time for
Yes,
us.
big time Christmas season. Rut's going on, deer chasing. It's a good time to be around.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite times of the year. So, December 26th and 27th are always my favorite days to be in the woods, especially the 27th. And it may just be because that's a day that I've always been able to go.
So you don't have to go to your in-laws' house and then go to the other cousin's house the next day?
No, not too much.
That's what I do.
See, we do ours before the rut. See, you just have one Christmas. That's what I do. What are you going to be doing? You're not going to be hunting?
I'll probably be at my in-laws' side on before Christmas, and after Christmas, I'll be at my parents'.
There you go.
So,
well, we'll hunt
y'all have
for
fun
you.
hunting the
hunt
rut.
for you. That's right.
So we've got Dr. Bronson Strickland sitting over here on the couch, and he just got back from Texas, and he killed a whopper.
Hey, we like a whopper.
It was a blast. It was the I'm gonna miss the peak of the rut here.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of like Dudley. We go home to Georgia and we're gonna be there about a week, so I'll be on the tail end of it when we get back. But it was the peak of the rut there, and it was in South Texas, and it was just. I was able to witness something that's really, I'm delighted, tickled, satisfied, everything, overwhelmed with gratitude with the buck I got to kill. But I got to witness at 20, 25 yards, so close that I could get it on my phone, the video of not a buck sparring match, but an absolute knockdown, drag out buck fight.
Getting with it.
Two mature bucks locked up. And I think my video was like a minute and like 30 seconds, minute and 45 seconds. They are just tangled up and going and going. So that was the first time outside of captivity, our deer research fins, that I'd seen that in the wild. That was really, really cool.
excellent.
I tell you what, they're impressive when they get to scrapping. I mean, the sounds, the noises, the dust flying. I mean,
And the two bucks fighting called in another buck.
Oh,
So just like
now
what
you're
you're
talking.
thinking's going on with your rattling and
Yeah.
a buck comes, those two were in front of me, locked up, going at it, pushing each other around, and then here comes another buck just running in. Of course, he was a middle-aged buck,
I was going to ask
probably
that.
3 or 4 at the most, and he saw the two mature bucks going at it, and he didn't want any part of
He
that. He
left.
skedaddled,
Yeah.
but brought him in.
So what ended up breaking up the fight? Did one of them just give up? Or
Yeah, one of them just gave up, yielded, and then they go running off with the victor, putting his antlers right in the rear end of the loser and chasing him off. Yeah. I'll show you the video afterwards.
It was so close, not only could you hear it, you could probably feel it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, probably so, to some degree. Yeah.
I've heard of folks tying antlers to like a rope. So when they're in the deer stand, not only do you get the noise out there, but you get some vibrations in the ground.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Seems like in theory that would work.
No, I know it
And
worked.
Bobby's over here laughing, but when people are doing it on the ground, they're banging antlers on the ground and sticks and.
Hey, look, Dudley's 100% right. That's the way you do it. I see you over there sneering.
I'm just laughing at
but
Dudley with
It sounds more realistic. that
There's
way.
more noises that go on than the rattling of the horns. Little tick, 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 tick. That's
Yeah.
there's a clash and then there's a push and tugging match.
Grunting and
Grunting and
And there was no, when you listen to the rattling experts from years ago, there's this kind of introduction this little subtle where they tickle the antlers.
They
a little
just
bit.
went right
they
into
go
it.
right- no.
None of that. It was get into close contact. They both laid their ears back and started going side to side and blowing their
Posturing.
chest up, and neither one of them would back down. And then it was just like two bighorn sheep. They just lunged each other, went back and forth. It was amazing.
It's amazing that more of them don't lose an eye or something during the season.
A lot of them are pretty tore up.
And during that same hunt, I saw an ancient buck that was missing an eye. That's probably from fighting.
We have, caped a lot of deer out, and when it's intense, when your buck-doe ratio is right, you'd be surprised. They are tore up. I mean, tine marks, when you get the skin off them all in the chest. We found a buck dead at Toxie's place that had been, you couldn't physically see it, but once we skinned him out, he was just, looked like a piece of Swiss cheese.
Coincidentally, Craig Harper was with me, and the buck he shot, when we got him skinned on his hindquarter, he had a hole in his hindquarter that you could easily stick your pinky in, but we could not really detect a defined hole in the hide. So we don't know if there was enough give in the hide, enough elasticity where it's still, or if that had healed up, it
Probably
being on
healed up.
externally kind of healed up. But it was clear as day, and you could put your finger in it, and that there was just no other explanation than it being a tine.
They're ferocious.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see a battle.
Yeah,
It's a battle
it's a
royale.
battle.
Mm-hmm.
And ain't nothing like watching it. I mean,
Oh, man.
it's amazing. I've been
My
fortunate
heart was
myself.
pumping watching that,
Yeah.
just like I was, about to shoot a buck or something.
So tell us the story of this deer you killed.
It was, I guess the story, I saw it on day one. So again, this is in South Texas. And they had a really severe summer. So they don't quote me exactly, but it was like close to 90 days or something. It was like the entire summer, they had consecutive days over 100 degrees and no rainfall. And even for South Texas, that's extreme. So the thing that was a bit confusing was there really wasn't, when you would see a mature buck, there wasn't that bull of the woods look to them. They were a lot thinner than they normally. And so it was like all these bucks that were probably 6 or 7 or 5, they all kind of looked 4.5. They all had that muscular, sleek look, but not that big, the swollen neck and the shoulder, where you just see them literally in 1 second, you go, that's a mature buck.
Yeah.
There wasn't any of that.
It's
So
like they've been on keto for the last 6 months.
There he is, Lanny.
That's an
Oh, yeah.
awesome buck.
yeah.
Golly, Bronson,
So
I'm jealous.
there you were.
There he was.
There I was, shaking. I mean, bona fide buck fever. I'm looking at that going, man, that is a whopper. I'd like to harvest him. But I could not, I was not sure that it was a mature buck. And that was the rule was, all bucks have to be mature. But I was lucky enough, and who I was with, I got enough, not a good photo with your phone, but I got enough that the landowner, who was my former advisor, that was another part about it, is my former master's advisor, got to go to his place. And he had enough familiarity with that buck that he knew it was a mature buck, so gave me the green light to harvest him. So I'm just like, man, I saw him, out of this stand on the first day. I'm going to go right back, and he'll probably be back.
No go.
Day one, this would have been day 2, the second hunt. Didn't see him. Third hunt, didn't see him. Fourth hunt, didn't see him. Essentially, last hunt. And on getting ready to go on that last hunt, I was just processing, do I go back to where I know he was one time, or I just try to go somewhere different? So I'm processing all this stuff about he's probably been locked up with a doe. He's probably somewhere else on the ranch, but I'm just like, I know I saw him here. He's probably going to be back, and I'm just going to cross my fingers. And it just got lucky. He came back to that, in sight of that one stand, and was able to get a shot.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a deer.
Yeah, what does he score?
Believe it or not, He's probably going to go right at 150.
Yeah,
Nice.
well, I believe it.
You're looking at the
Yeah,
good
I would
side
think
there.
so at least.
Did not have a cable with me, so in terms of accurately measuring the beams and stuff like that, but just a rough score, high 140s, low 150s.
It's an awesome deer.
Yeah, it's awesome deer.
What do you weigh?
Yeah. What do you weigh?
We did not have a scale that was very
what?
accurate.
Biologists
Well,
did
biologists
not
didn't have a scale?
We
what
I love to hear that.
I sent Coulter Chitwood a scale, a Moultrie scale. Was on here talking about pronghorns, and I asked them. He said, "I've never weighed one."
Do we need to get Bronson a scale for his truck?
Yes. Before you leave today, we'll
We're
send you
going to
home
get you
with
hooked
a
up with
Moultrie scale.
Okay.
Boom.
So let me just explain this here. He does that for work all day, every day. He's in and around all of that technical stuff. And when he gets a chance to go hunting, he just wants to go hunting.
I don't buy
It's
that.
kind of like the fact that I don't like to have 8 million potted plants on my back porch anymore.
you
know?
don't?
No.
What happened?
Just, you do it all
No
the
more
time.
no more
You-
succulents?
You do it, a few succulents because they're easy, but none of the stuff you got to water every day. It's kind of like,
So something happened. Y'all didn't have one at the
Right.
at the skinning rack. Is what I assume.
Yeah, I'm a guest. This wasn't my place, and there was a scale there, but it's kind of been out in the elements a while.
Well,
and
what
so
do you
it's
think he
getting
weighed?
Yeah,
I'm
what
just
you-
trying to get it
Ballpark.
180.
Yeah.
180. Yeah.
Not
222.
222.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to get a buck
I
at
know,
220,
yeah.
222
222 is
pounds.
pretty
But
big. I'm going after you. I'm gonna have to do that.
we'll bring it on.
Yeah, I will.
Well, that's a great deer.
That is a great deer.
It
Congratulations.
was wonderful. Had a great time.
It sure is fun when it all comes together.
Yes,
It's
it
fun,
is.
period, but it's really fun when it comes
So with
together.
Craig Harper being down there, I bet there were some interesting conversations.
That'd have been a good camp.
There was quite a few conversations. Yeah.
I get so tickled talking to him. He's so much fun to talk to.
Oh, he is. Yeah, we had a wonderful time.
I'll just say it. If Craig Harper came to my place, I'd be a little intimidated that he's like critiquing my habitat the whole time.
Oh, he would
Oh,
be.
he
Well, I'm
wouldn't
sure
do
he
that.
And you, of course. Just in his mind, critiquing it.
Your daughter's been begging you to hunt since her little brother shot the big 8 last year. You've ran a fire, dissed the fields, got stuck, got unstuck. Planted food plots, fertilized, and prayed for rain. You moved trees, limbed roads, even bought one of those fancy cell cameras.
So what's your excuse?
LS Tractor.
Moultrie has pioneered the game management category. Today, Moultrie is one of the best-selling brands of feeders and seeders in the world, and they continue to innovate with new technology that gamekeepers will rely on. Moultrie products are always field-tested and designed for hunters by hunters, combining forward-thinking innovation with time-tested practicality. Moultrie, first in feeders since 1979. All right, so guys, Moultrie is offering our listeners a 15% site-wide discount at MoultrieFeeders.com. Use code Mossy Oak with a capital M, Mossy Oak, at MoultrieFeeders.com and get that 15% discount. So two things. I wanted to, since we're kind of talking about big deer, there was the Boone and Crockett Club, which your trivia last week, and Lanny and I and Dudley are undefeated in trivia, by the way. So, but they
believe you said that.
they did a post with what states had the most Boone and Crockett entries, and I'm not sure when they redid this, but I found it very interesting to see that. Like, I've got the top states here, and it's interesting to see what they did rank. So, does anybody guess the top state for entries?
All time?
For Boone and Crockett?
All time or like in the last decade?
No, the last decade.
I've got my guess.
Well, go ahead, Dudley.
I think this is an older one, but I think Dane County, Wisconsin is one of the top ones.
I was going to say Wisconsin.
Wisconsin is the top
Wisconsin.
one.
Yep.
And so the number two one, this might be more interesting than number one. What is number two?
In the last 10 years.
Well, when they recently updated. So I'm going to say in the last couple of years.
Are we all guessing this?
I'm on
I've got a guess in my mind.
We'll go.
number 2.
Oklahoma.
I'm gonna say Texas.
We'll say Kentucky.
Indiana.
Indiana.
God, I forgot about that.
And Indiana previously was number 10. They moved all the way to number 2.
There's some gamekeepers up there.
So the number 3 state was Ohio,
Hmm.
which had previously been the number 5 state. Bronson, your state there, you just get Kentucky is the number 4 state, previously number 6. Iowa, surprisingly, is number 5. I would have thought Iowa might have been a little bit higher up. Iowa had previously been number 3, so they dropped. Illinois. How do you say that? Illinois? Illinois. Number 6, and they were number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Too many hunters up there.
Minnesota.
Brown County been shot out.
Minnesota, number 7. They were number 4. And Texas, dear to Bronson's heart, Texas is number 8. Moving up, they were number 11.
What about, did you record the southeastern states?
I didn't. I should have, but I didn't. We'll do that next time we bring you on.
So I wonder what it is about Indiana that's helping. Is it have something to do with their harvest
It's probably, well, I mean, it's
regulations?
Probably, I would think not as big a destination as Illinois.
Yeah, sleeper, so to state that kind of got exposed maybe. Yeah, and they may have some rifle
and Kentucky's
regulations.
the same way. I mean,
there's a really big deal. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can be going on in the landscape, of course, but a lot of it too can just be regulatory in terms of going from a 2-buck state to a 1-buck or a 3-buck to a 2-buck has the effect, of course, of more bucks living. Right. And by default, getting older, and by default, a proportion of those are going to be Boone and Crockett's.
I think Kentucky's a 1-buck state, and I think Indiana's a 1-buck state.
Yeah, I think Indiana's a 1-buck state.
Yeah, and I think they've got rifle regulations as well.
And I want to say it's a little more difficult for out of non-residents, maybe something like that. It's got to be.
So there's one other thing I wanted to point out before we get started. I've been wanting to tell you about this, and I hadn't told anybody else about it. So,
okay.
But you know how we've struggled with getting food plots up this year. We just didn't get any rain.
Right.
And I can remember I had an event that I witnessed, and when I saw it, I felt like I was getting to see something few people get to see. Much like your fight that you got to see. But late one afternoon, I was on the edge of a food plot, and if you got down and you just really tried, you could see a little green coming up. There wasn't much green at all, but there was a mama doe came out there with 2 fawns, and she started browsing what was there, and those fawns would go and they would put their faces underneath her face. Like they were trying to say, "What are you eating, Mama?" is what I took it to be. And everywhere she put her face, they had just immediately put their face right there. And I felt like she was teaching them to browse on that. It's what it looked like to me. And I just wondered, have you ever seen anything like that?
Not to that extent, no. I mean, everybody has. You've seen fawns adjacent to their mom and foraging with them, but I've never seen it that specific like what you're talking about.
It was like that plot just emerged that morning, and it was like their first time to walk out in it. It is what it felt like to me.
Their first exposure to a cereal grain and a clover and a brassica.
She was telling them how to do it.
It's what it looked like. If you like smeared a little peanut butter on the floor and had 3 dogs, you know how they would all be right there licking it. That's what they were doing.
Very interesting.
Had to be that biologic.
Had to be. Yeah, and you know, when I look over here and I think about Indiana, our sales in Indiana have been really strong in the last few years.
We have turned the Boone and Crockett curve.
For real.
Well, in the South, it's been a couple years since I saw this. And, you know, all this come from year to year, and another state puts 6 more in, and so they're first place. But Mississippi, the year I looked at it, this is several years ago, but from the 10-year accumulation, Mississippi led the Southeast. It may be Arkansas now.
I want to say we led the Southeast in age class of deer as well.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
and we
shocking.
were one of the first to do any kind of antler restrictions that were, you know, to where we had to target deer over 1 year old, you know.
And then the DMAP program.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I tell you, this year there's been
Some
I
big
can
deer
think
hunting
of
ground.
3 really big deer killed in Mississippi. One over 200 down around Natchez, and then Jessica Crawford's daughter killed a true 190.
Caroline Winters.
A
in the North
190.
Delta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was I just saw it last night. There was a lady in Winston County killed a 181-inch deer.
In Winston County.
Winston County.
I
Yeah.
hadn't seen that one.
That's just 20 minutes from my house.
That's where old Rob Kenny lives in. No, yeah, that's Winston County.
I think it is. And Rob had, killed his first deer this past
Yeah,
week.
he sure did.
Got a
He is
little blood on the
board.
biologic.
He sure did. Go Rob.
Everybody needs to ask him the story when they see him. We won't go into a lot of detail.
Big waterfowl guy. We broke him into the venison game.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
It was just a great little story.
It's a great
I
story.
mean, everybody has accidentally shot a button buck. Everybody.
I think I did 3 in one season one time.
Well, let me tell you what. The first one I killed in my life was a buck, and I could not be more pleased with it.
Yeah, I can remember early on doing it myself. And if you're trying to shoot does, which was what they were trying to do, Bronson, you're nodding your head.
Oh, yeah.
It
it's
happens.
going to happen.
It's better. We just need to get rid of the term button buck and just use the word antlerless.
Would you? Don't they say it's like 10% of the harvest ends up being?
Typically, yeah. About 10% of the antlerless harvest will be buck fawns.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
anyways.
we've also heard, maybe I'm getting off subject here, which I'm known to do.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm hearing, and I don't know if it got from the MDWFP or where I'm hearing this, a murmur. I could have just dreamed it up. I don't know. But I'm hearing some people talk that if this time of year, if there's a spike and he's less than 3 inches, then more than likely he was either born too late or born too early or something like that. Doesn't have the right nutrition and would probably be good to harvest him if you're trying to drop deer density.
That's going to be pretty debatable.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on your goals and your harvest program and so forth. But yeah, that is something we were a part of with MDWF&P.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I hate to generalize, because you could literally be 4 counties over and this wouldn't work for you.
Mm-hmm.
The age and antler growth relationship would be different. But where this study was done, which was in Lowndes County,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right around here, there was a pretty clear line, and I want to say it was like 3 inches or 2 inches, but those little itty bitty spikes versus an older, 6 or 8 inch spike.
Mm-hmm.
If you followed those in consecutive years, the little bitty spikes tended to have smaller antlers at 3 or 4 years of age.
Interesting.
And so it's just one of those where if that is part of your program where you needed to kill some bucks and you were not getting it done with the older bucks and had to get down into the yearling age class, so there's a bunch of ifs here.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had to dip into the yearling age class to harvest some bucks, that would be the buck to harvest. But I do not like to generalize and say that works everywhere.
Right.
That was right there at that study site.
Makes sense. This is Lanny at the Gamekeepers of Mossy Oak. I've been shooting Nosler bullets as long as I've been wearing Mossy Oak. Nosler ballistic tip ammunition is made for knocking deer down right where they stand. Nosler's famous ballistic tip bullet is the key. It has controlled expansion and bone-crushing punch to turn a whitetail's lights out. Bring home more deer this year with ballistic tip ammunition from Nosler. Buy now at nosler.com.
It's really odd to see those because I know exactly. There's some you see and it's just something just barely poking out of the hair, and you can miss it really easy if at late afternoon you're trying to kill does. But then you see other spikes and they're 4, 5, 6 inches long,
Right.
and it's the same age animal.
Same age class animal, year class animal, but there's probably
A couple of months.
Yeah, it
Quite
could have been
possibly.
born from a fawn that went into estrus a month or 2 later.
Yeah, in
So,
February or something.
That's right.
Technically, that deer may be 1 or 2 months younger.
So
than
if we're trying to massively lower deer density, those guys should probably be on our list.
That would be my last ditch
one.
effort.
Yeah,
if I was not getting it done with doe harvest, if I was not getting it done with 3.5 or older bucks that had below average antlers. I mean, that doe harvest number 1, selective buck harvest at 3.5 or older number 2. If I had to go down to shoot yearling,
Step 3.
that'd be step 3. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Sounds like you'd have to have a pretty high population of deer to even consider that most of the time.
I'm gonna tell you, I have never seen more deer than I've seen this year in my life around these parts of the world. Maybe just where I am, but
You would think that deer, if he's just a couple of months behind, eventually would catch up. And I'm saying 2 or 3 years from now, but I believe you when you say studies show that they'd never catch
maybe
up.
it would have to be 7 or 8 years old to reach its full potential compared to like 5 to 6 or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
really interesting.
we
I know
always
I'd heard something. I just didn't know what it was.
Well, that really is an interesting way to something to look at.
Yeah.
That's kind of new to us.
And because we're being encouraged to shoot your limit of bucks and does.
I want to be real careful about this, though.
Yeah.
That was a studied population where we had all this data, where we knew the age and the average antler size of that population. So what can be difficult is someone hears this and there's this generalization that,
Right.
hey, they said that yearling bucks that have spikes of 3 inches or less, shoot them. Well, if you're in a population somewhere else in Mississippi, go to South Mississippi, you might be shooting half your yearling bucks if you did that. Or we're just going to shoot spikes on that could be 90% of your yearling buck cohort in certain parts. So it has to be really, really site specific, a lot of data collection, working with an expert to come up with those recommendations.
So the MDWFP is encouraging not us, everybody to, shoot their limit of deer. Is that in relation to deer density?
Deer density, as well as if you're in a CWD zone for CWD management. But yeah, deer populations appear to be, from the data, the surveys, et cetera, increasing.
Yeah.
Well, and so prior to that, in past years, it seems like people had just kind of fallen off on shooting their does and some others. So that's what they're trying to correct. Yeah. And let's be clear now, Bronson. We didn't say to shoot those spikes. You did. So I want to make sure. But people should go back and listen to that again and not make just really quick assumptions, because
it's really interesting stuff. I mean, just all the way around to me.
My assumption on this deer population thing, and again, it's an assumption, is that some of these larger tracts where it's one landowner and you have a lot of larger landowners near each other. That's where I'm hearing about and seeing higher populations.
Yeah.
But when you get to these areas where it's a lot of 40s, 80s, and 120s all together, and all of those people hunt a lot, some of those areas, in my mind, when I'm driving around, it has fewer deer.
Interesting.
Those guys have been filling their freezer every year.
So it just depends.
It always depends. Larry. Always depends.
So, Bronson, you came over here with this publication in your hand. Y'all have got
We've
a new
already ran out of
study.
time. We even came what we talked about.
Yeah. So y'all have been doing a lot of research on movements, and this is some pretty fascinating stuff. And where should we start? I want to make sure we cover the highlights and the things that you found fascinating and interesting and surprising. And I'd like for people that are listening to this to be able to hopefully apply something that they learn here to make them a better hunter.
Yeah. And I'm going to cut y'all off. I urge everybody to go and print this PDF out and put a staple in it and put it on your desk. It's very important.
Yeah, so you can find it on the MSU Deer Lab website. That's where you can go. We also, Steve and I recorded a podcast on Deer University, and so if you watch that podcast on YouTube, we did a little QR code to help people, so you can just put your phone on that and go. But anyway, if you go to the MSU Deer Lab website, we got a publications link, and under that you'll find this. So it's free to view, free to download, pass it around. But yeah, this finally, I mean, heck, we kind of been talking about some of these results for a number of years. And so we finally got most of all the journal articles done and all the peer review. So what we wanted to do is finally, it culminate in a publication and all the technical jargon out as best we could, but in something that managers and hunters could read, use, think about, and that's what this document is.
Well, how do you come up with this is understanding buck movement? So do y'all have a bunch of ideas that y'all want to study and some student is like, hey, this interests me, I'd like to do this one, or do y'all assign it to somebody?
Well, it starts with an idea, and then that idea needs to be funded for it to become a research project. And the idea was MDWF&P. I mean, they're the ones that funded this, and so they're getting feedback every single year. Where did the deer go? We don't have any bucks. What happened to them? And and their response, of course, is very logical. The deer are there. You're just not seeing them. Mm-hmm. And so, but finally it culminated in, well, let's just do a study. Let's put some GPS collars on a lot of bucks in an area that's intensively hunted and intensively managed. And so that's essentially what it was. And so we ended up with 2 graduate students that were in charge of that. So they did this work for their master's degree, Ashley and Colby. And essentially each student would kind of have a theme of what they were looking at. And so for example, one of the themes was, you'll see in here, a behavioral profile. And that's looking at, is a deer, are they moving? Are they bedded? Are they foraging? And that's just a way to look at the data to give a behavioral profile. That was under Ashley's domain. And then Colby kind of did more of the habitat related studies, where bucks are spending their time. Does that change relative to hunting pressure? That was kind of the theme of what he looked at. And then there's just all these little questions when you're looking at these data. What about this? What about that? What about that? We just quantified all that, things that we thought would be useful, and generate the graphs and put it in a publication.
How long did it take y'all to do this study?
The study was about 3 years. So there's a period, I'm just going to round here. There's like a year-ish of capture and putting the collars on and all that. And then we had the goal, it all depends on the battery life in the unit, but we try to get 2 years out of each buck. Sometimes they get killed, sometimes the collar fails, but normally that worked out. And then to get 2 years out of those collars, we have to set the timing of how often it transmits the data. And so we wanted to make sure we had very fine scale movement data during the hunting season, because that's of the greatest interest. So we were getting locations every 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes we get a ping. The cost of that, though, is it burns your battery. So when we got to the end of hunting season, then we were doing like a ping every 3 or 4 hours, conserve battery life. And then when hunting's getting near October again, we increase the frequency. So,
well, that's in my mind, that makes sense because they move more during those times, right? And so by getting more pings, it would be more detailed.
Yeah, you're exactly right. But also the interaction with hunters. I mean, we just want it to be fine scale. You're exactly right. They are moving more, but that's also a more sensitive time. We want the most complete data set.
They could also be bumped by a hunter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right
okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Furminator is the industry's most versatile piece of food plot equipment, allowing plotters to do every step of the process, working the soil, adding seed and soil supplements, and compacting, from start to finish with a single implement. It's hassle-free by design. Set it for the seed size and simply drive the tractor, and the Furminator does the rest. Check it out at thefurminator.com.
Hey guys, Dudley from GameKeepers here. I want to tell you about the all-new Gunner Dog Bowl. It's designed for home and built for travel. It's customizable, leak-resistant, light on weight, solid on durability, and rust-proof. Like other Gunner products, they're made in Nashville and designed for everywhere.
Well, what came out of this that surprised you the most?
Let me see if I can find that figure and I'll show you.
Yeah, and while you're looking at that, so you've got these two students. Why don't you give their full names?
Ashley Chance, she now works for the Wildlife Federation, and Colby Henderson is now a private lands biologist for MDWF&P, Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. So, yep, they are well into their careers and doing well. So that's feels very good. They did a great job for their master's degree, and they have launched their wildlife careers. So they're doing well.
Nice.
Excellent. We're proud of them. Very proud of them.
These kids coming out of Mississippi State are getting good jobs.
Hey, man.
So here's one, Bobby, that I would think would be of interest because it really plays into the whole bedding area and the buck's bedroom and how reliable their affinity to going back. If you go to figure 9, and that's the difference between the total distance they move and the net distance that they move. And so you'll see with that graph, it's yards traveled per day, and it's broken out by the different rut periods. But notice that other metric there is called a net distance. So total distance is, Bobby, if I put a collar on you at 6 a.m. and I tracked how far you went for 24 hours until 6 a.m. the next day, that's the total path you took. That would be your total distance moved.
So kind of like your
steps.
step count.
Yeah, your
step
step
count
on you wear all the time.
on your phone.
That's right. That's right.
He's a step counter.
The net, the technical way to say it is net displacement, but the net distance would be the distance between where you started and you did your total and where you ended up. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where you started. So if where you started and did your total day and came back to right where you started, your net distance would be 0.
Okay.
Now, if a buck is going back to the same place every day, old reliable, I know he's bedded there every single day, net distance would be near 0. But net distance, as you see, varies from in the pre-rut to 400 to 500 yards all the way into the late post-rut to over 700 yards. So they're moving a lot. So where you catch them on day 1 is not necessarily where you're going to catch them on day 2.
That's still pretty tight, though, to be within 700 yards where you were that morning. I mean, I know Bobby's got a 0 net distance every night, but I mean, most,
Well, 700 yards could be the difference in being on one end of the clear cut or the other.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
That's almost half a mile.
Almost half a mile.
Yeah. And something we always talk about, too, that we wanted to include in here that people could actually see, a lot of talk about excursions. And remember, excursions are when you have what we called a sedentary personality
versus mobile.
Versus the mobile. That's right. Sedentary is just that traditional, when you look at their cluster of points, it's a big old blob. And they're all in that blob. Well, you can see there, that would be figure 11. You see where they took these big movements, these big swings out. Yeah. Those are excursions. And whoop-de-doo, the thing is, that's if you're on a managed property, that's when they're vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So if you have neighbors that aren't aligned with you on your management program, and I was seeing this buck, and then he gets killed and he's gone, then it's probably happens on an excursion. And so they are doing that. Every buck is doing that a couple times every year. So they're leaving your property.
So you could potentially, though, pick up another deer.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's that story. Well, I've never seen him before. I didn't have any pictures of him. And
Absolutely.
Who is this?
Yeah, it's not possible. That is going to happen.
Yeah.
I think I read where about 1/3 of the deer are more mobile, and about 2/3 are going to be your homeboys.
Yeah.
Homeboys.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so the mobile personality, I think we got some graphs in here on that. I hope we do anyway.
You do.
Yeah, there we go. A mobile personality is just that essentially their home range is in 2 different spots. So they spend a couple months or half a year in one place, and then they spend half a year in a completely different place with no overlap at all. And so those are kind of those cases too where, and you've probably experienced it. I've never seen this buck before, but every year around November 1st, this buck shows up on my property and I get pictures of him. That is a living example of this mobile personality.
I think the most popular example of that, and I know all of us have seen this, is the deer that was crossing the Mississippi River.
Oh yeah.
In part of this study, and
Yeah.
he did it 2 years in a row.
Mm-hmm. And essentially at the same time. I mean, it was like within a week or two, him leaving Mississippi and going to Louisiana, leaving Louisiana, coming back to Mississippi. It was timed up literally within a week or two, both of those years. Yeah, so that's an extreme example.
Yeah, I can't help but think that's like Mother Nature's way of keeping deer from being inbred or something, you know. Just
An extreme example, maybe. We think of that, though, Dudley, with dispersal. You know, yearling buck dispersal, those
Right.
bucks leaving. That's
Okay.
generally what we think
Got
of
it.
with that.
got it.
I often wonder, is it something in a small proportion of deer of just being a colonizer? In other words, I'm never going to know if there's greener pastures, if I don't occasionally take an excursion or an extreme, go somewhere else. And so maybe it's just somewhere embedded within them evolutionarily to seek greener pastures.
I mean, some individuals, you know, I like to go on long walks in the woods. You know, Bobby likes to sit in a shooting house.
Well, who killed a 222-inch deer this year?
22 pound.
200, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, some
There's a big difference there.
some people are
Huge difference.
some people are bird hunters and rabbit hunters, and some people are deer hunters. You know,
Yeah.
we're all different.
So do you think that that more deer are excursionists than we might have thought? I mean, because obviously you don't have collars on, but does this study show that you know, a lot of these deer may be getting up and doing these long jaunts?
Well, they all were. They all were. So kind of the difference, the way it broke down was all of the sedentary bucks did these excursions. And so an excursion is literally a day or 2 or 3 at the most. But they are always coming back to their home range. They're just doing a little loop. But what's interesting is these bucks that had the mobile personalities, they didn't do excursions. It was like the excursion nature within them was the mobile personality. They didn't do little 2-day excursions. They just went to that new place and they set up. But Dudley, you may also remember within that mobile personality, we also had 2 categories that were very defined. It wasn't a one-off. It had these differences that Luke, I believe, called them a shifter versus a bouncer. And what that means is they're both mobile personality, so they have these distinct home ranges. The shifter is they moved this home range, they moved over here and stayed here and then came back. The bouncer has the 2 different home ranges, but he bounces like a pinball back and forth between them. So we saw a number of bucks do that, and a number that they shift and they stayed there, that they would shift back, like buck 140 crossing the river.
Sure.
That's a shifter. He shifted to a different area. And then we had the sedentaries. It's like, then they did the excursions. So it's like there's some degree of this exploration
Sure.
in all of them. They just do it different ways.
And manifest it different.
Lanny's a bouncer. I'm a shifter.
I'm
and,
sure a
and
bouncer.
Bobby's a sedentary.
Yeah. I'm definitely mobile.
So I've always, you know, since the having cameras and kind of trying to keep up with deer, it seems like they leave during a lot of the deer stay on the property spring and summer and in the early fall, and then one day they're just gone. And I've always heard they have a different rut territory or a rut range, or is that proving true in any of your?
Yeah, well, for some bucks, that is exactly the case. But then there's also, you know, we're talking about hunting season movements primarily. We then also have the whole bachelor group deal, you know, during the summer. So there can be some shifts there, and some of them are doing it dramatically, some not so much. But the bachelor group spending time together, and then they break apart. As soon as they start getting into hard antler, they start breaking off and go into their fall home range. And then some of them will then even move again after that.
Are the does pretty much staying where they are?
We only have, as part of different studies, maybe 10 or 20 does versus in here we had 50, 60 or more bucks. We would see that sometimes with does, that they would also have a mobile personality, but I don't think it was. It's hard to say because our sample size was so limited.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to say what proportion, but we did see that behavior.
So you wouldn't think that they would be quite as mobile because in the summertime they've got fawns with them, and you wouldn't think they would be dragging those fawns a long distance in the summer.
Mm-hmm. You wouldn't think. Yeah.
Sounds like we need to get somebody to fund a study on does.
Now you're talking.
So right now the moon is at 61% of being full. On the day that I love to hunt so much, that 26th and 27th, it'll be 100% full. From what I read going through your study here, the things that I've thought all my life about how the moon maybe affects a little movement, I think you guys have proven that that's not the case in this. Do you feel confident in saying something like that?
I guess the way I will respond to that, as always, is just look at the data. And that is figure 5. Look at the data there. We have the daily movements, average movements for all these bucks, and superimposed on that, we have the moon phase, so the amount of luminosity, and there's just no relationship with moon phase.
I know it's increasingly difficult for people to believe people in the science community, especially thanks to COVID a couple of years ago. But it's hard to refute a GPS collar wrapped around the neck of a deer. I mean, it's just hard to argue that.
I would
agree more.
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, that
as much as I want to say a full moon.
Every
affects
time
deer
you
movement,
mention that, somebody's like, "Ain't no way I've done." I mean,
I've seen it. I know what I saw.
But I said that at first, and then I thought about it, and I'm like, this is a GPS collar on a deer, and it pings every so minutes and proves whether they're moving. If they move 10 feet, is that moving? Or
we probably wouldn't pick that up.
Gotcha.
So, you're using satellites to triangulate the position. So there's, at any given time, there may be a 10 to 15 meter error associated with it.
I'd love to hear a listener's argument on this, if they think there's a gap in this or any holes in this, the way this study was done. But there's a lot of studies out there that you're like, well, if they had done this or done that, but this is a GPS collar around the neck of a deer. How can you,
And even think of it this way too. So, to me, things have to, and this is probably me being a nerdy scientist part, but when you report a finding, here's what the data are. Look, you have to then interpret it. You have to then to give a reason, a hypothesis for why you're seeing this. Otherwise, it could just be random chance. So it has to be a reasonable conclusion. So Bobby, I'll pitch it back to you. Why would moon phase affect the hunger and or sex drive of a buck? Does it affect you? Do you get less hungry or more hungry based on moon phase?
Well, Lanny, you got your hand raised. Go ahead.
What's the old, Lanny, just tell them what the old theory is of, why a deer would move when the moon is out at night over. It seems like common sense to me.
I was actually looking at this graph. So, I was just wanted to say something after you said the question he asked you need to answer.
Well, so I don't see how it would affect hunger. But I wonder if I've just all my life heard, well, look at all the crazies. It was a full moon last night. The crazy people were out doing all kind of crimes and just stuff happens on full moons.
I think the emergency room stats are true.
And so I've just always had heard it like full moon, the deer would feed all night long. They could see better. Maybe there was something to that. So then you would hunt middle of the day because those deer were going to be
hungry again.
They'd be hungry again, and they'd get up during the middle of the day. So that's kind of what I grew up hearing.
Yeah, me too.
Me too. But if you look at this graph, though, I mean, and look at the data. I mean, what that shows me that there's more buck movement on that full moon than any other time during the year.
How do you see that?
Well, I mean, I look at the peak buck movement, and then I look at the peak moon, and like the peak of the rut is during the full moon.
So you're seeing a rut effect, not a moon effect.
Yeah, and I think the rut, but
No, I think he's seeing all that together.
Yeah, I've seen all that together, and I wonder, and I've always wondered this. I thought the moon phase affected when the does came in estrus, not that the deer could see better at night. Again, completely anecdotal. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
They've proven that wrong by measuring the fetus of baby deer to prove they're a certain length at a certain time, and then they can go back to the date that they were conceived, and they've shown that.
Yeah, but that's when they were bred. But they can only happen in a 24-hour period, right? Isn't that right? What you told me? Is that wrong?
Can they conceive within we think it's about a 12-hour period.
That's pretty crazy.
That's what they're in standing heat. So they're going to be like in estrus probably for a 2-day period. That's when the tending and the courtship and the chasing, and then she'll be in standing heat.
You got 12
she'll
hours
be
to
receptive.
get it done. Gotcha.
Give or take.
Yeah, I mean, but again, the graph, the peak of the rut.
Well, go to the other.
Peak of the moon phase.
I mean, there's four other full moons on that graph.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you.
No difference in movement there.
Yeah,
it just happens to coincide with.
Does it just happen to coincide?
Day.
Does the peak rut just happen to coincide with the full moon here?
Yeah,
it has no influence on it.
And every year that cycle's not going to align as perfectly with the peak of the rut here.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? It shifts a few days every.
Can y'all see what I'm talking about?
And it's going to happen this year.
Yeah, it's happening this year. Is why I keep thinking about it.
The full moon is going to peak about the 26th, 27th, and that's according to all the little calendars that I get. That's when it's happening around.
And I've always looked, and again, it's just I always use the full moon and whatever the full moon is in late December is when I need to be in the woods the most.
I'm going to jump in.
The full moon changes from year to year.
Just real quick. So
yeah,
the thought
it does, but so does the rut vary a little bit.
According to the fetus studies, it does not.
Okay, so, I didn't do the fetus study.
So I guess I know this study was just here in the South in Lowndes County, but talking about the moon, we were in Oklahoma a month ago at the peak of their rut, and wonder what their the moon phase was.
Was it full moon? You were out there.
Yeah, I would. If I'm trying to remember,
I think it was full moon.
Well, I have to go back and double check to be honest. But
go ahead, say something anecdotal.
No. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying I wonder. Well, to be honest, I can't remember.
Well, go look at the date.
Yeah, go Google it. It'll show you the moon. You can go back to the weather.
So
here, I'll go. Where were you hunting? I'll find out.
Why? I mean, I think a lot of people are just more confident when they're hunting the full moon because of what they've always thought growing up. And so you sit longer, you look harder, you're hunting more intensive. And you may not go out and sit on a full day if it's not a full moon, so you're not going to see deer. I think we've just been tricking our brains on this.
I do too, Dudley. And I think that depending on what you call, and this is going to be very population by population, based on sex ratio and the deer density, et cetera. But whatever you're calling the peak rut, some people might say it's a 2-week period. Some people say it's a 3. I mean, there's rutting activity for a month, right?
Oh yeah,
between the pre and the peak.
100%.
Okay, so you are always at the beginning or the middle of the end. You're always going to have a full moon event during the rut.
Sure.
Because it's isn't it a 28-day?
Yeah, that's right.
So you're going to have that hitting during the rut at some time.
But don't does go into estrus based on photo period?
Yes, photo period. But that is independent of moon.
Right. But moon's got light.
But it comes up.
But that's not how it triggers their physiology. Yeah,
I'm trying.
You know what?
I know. A for effort.
I've always heard that December moon, full moon was called a rut moon.
Yeah,
I've heard that too, but I'm not buying it.
So they also
Go ahead.
They also say that waterfowl migrate by the moon. The biggest bunches of waterfowl migrate when the moon is full. Have you heard that as a biologist? Have you heard that?
I cannot speak to that. I don't know. And I'm not trying to, genuinely, I don't know. Yeah.
There's just so much misinformation.
But to Dudley's point, I mean, this is pretty daggum quantified right here.
It is.
I mean, and
I trust you 100%, Bronson. If I would put my life in, I believe that you're a stand-up guy and you guys have, it really is. So if you tell me this, I'm going to believe it.
I mean, he's got the data, and there's ways you can interpret the data.
To address, I will try my best. Shoot me a text tonight. I will try my best to look this up, Lanny, for you. And I remember seeing it. I don't know if they did it originally or they were reporting it, but Lindsay Thomas at QDMA and Quality Whitetails years ago had a fantastic graphic from a particular area. I don't think it was just a population, maybe a region at a couple like county scale, using fetal data. So, I mean, that is the final straw. Yeah. I mean, when that fetus was conceived, that's when you know. And they did that like for over 10 years. 10 years. And they had this graph, and you could just see every year there may be a 1 or 2 or 3 day, but the bell-shaped curve of the rut, every single year there was hardly any variation. And then they put, staggered with that as an informative graphic, they had where was the full moon relative to the peak of the rut. And you could just see the moon was here this year. This year it was right here. This year it was right here. The moon is dancing over that decade all around the peak of the rut, but the peak of the rut never changed.
Gotcha.
I mean, it was just very, very good way to graph that and demonstrate.
Now, that makes sense.
I'm just showing you 1 year.
Yeah.
What, 2 years here? Yeah. They had a decade.
Yeah.
So
you're right. Every month there's a new moon. Mm-hmm. So through all these years, I'm just speaking for Clay County. So if the peak of the rut right here is, say, December 27th, so in a 10-year window that we could have a half moon on the 27th, we could have a full moon, we could have no moon. It just but the 27th is going to always be that peak, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then you even get into stuff like, so what if it's a full moon but it's cloudy and the luminosity is not there? Is that affecting their vision at night? And then back to Bobby and I'm not picking on you with this, I've heard this my whole life. I'll hear it again probably this year about the emergency room, full moon, and that's true. I mean, from what I can tell, that is true. There'll be a subtle spike in some crime, but everybody's not behaving that way. So let's say you have a little bit of spike in the emergency room. So let's say the baseline of emergency room visits, I'm making, 100 visits a night. That's normal. And then we got the full moon night and it's 115. But see, we have an overwhelming number of people that aren't changing their behavior at all. But we're keying on some tiny little blip of a small number of individuals and saying, the full moon is changing society at some level.
Oh, now we're getting philosophical here. So if we were in the caveman days when we didn't have homes and electricity and lights, would that number be any different?
Probably.
Could be.
Probably. So what about just speaking with fish movement, thinking about that? I know you're not a fisher.
I mean, that's tides and all, I think there's more comes into play with that because it actually causes the water to go up and down.
Okay. Well, there's also, what is it called? The perigee and the apogee is how close the moon is versus how far the moon is from you. In other words, how big the moon is and how much magnetic draw it has on there. So I guess what I'm saying, there's more than one kind of full moon.
And there's a whole nother part of the moon that we're going to do this. We just have not had the time yet. Every time, like when we post something on social media, like showing these data about the moon, people are very quick to say, what about the position of the moon?
That's right.
So that gets into what is moon overhead, moon underfoot, moon rise, moon set.
Yeah.
And we haven't looked at that. So next year, Bobby, we might be sitting here and saying, hey, the luminosity of the full moon, new moon has nothing to do with it, but the timing of moon rise and moon set very well may. So I remain wide open. We're going to go with what the data tell us.
Heck yeah.
This is awesome.
I think it's cool too, the habitat use differences based on pressure, and then the stuff about, the hunting on a 5 kind of a, people hunt all weekend and then leave to go to work for 5 days and then come back, compared to areas that get hunted every day, or, that get very light usage.
Yeah.
That was an interesting part of it.
I thought the home range was pretty interesting. I mean,
Yeah, well, some of these bucks have a 500 acre,
right.
Fall, winter home range, and some of them, and that's that mobile personality, a couple thousand.
Then you got the 2,000 acre guy.
Yeah.
It's kind of like me
Yeah.
turkey
And
hunting.
it
versus
looks like
Bobby.
the average was around 700 acres maybe for the lower end.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, 850. Well,
I'm getting-
the median was 859. 27% occupied less than 500 acres, and 22% occupied more than 2,000.
So that old rule of thumb we always heard of Bucks homes
1 square
by
mile.
the square mile. Yeah, that's pretty on target
It is.
for some of the bucks, the sedentary bucks, not the mobile bucks.
Right.
So when you went through all this data, was there anything that jumped out at you that said, "Ooh, I'm gonna apply that to my hunting. That's gonna make
There
me
you
a
go.
better hunter"?
I'm not gonna say. I don't know if you can do a lot with it other than it gives me understanding, and I really like figure 16 with the daily home range versus a 2-week home range. And so I guess people that are listening and can't see the 2-week home range. So-
Goodness gracious! Let me just describe it. It looks like you shot some Apex, some TSS at about 20 yards with a extra full choke into this photograph of countryside.
You're looking at the wrong
That's
graph.
Well, that's figure
wrong
17.
Figure. Wrong figure. We're at 16.
Go to the left, Bob.
Come on, Richie. You don't have a sound
Thought
bite
I
for
had
that.
a good analogy there.
Hey, it still works.
Dun, dun, dun,
Bobby.
dun.
still
There it is.
Man,
So
That's pretty cool.
The 2-week home range follows exactly what you know is happening. They are covering a lot more ground during the rut, during the peak of the rut. But what is so amazingly similar is how much ground they cover a day.
Yeah.
200 acres. And so if you think of it like this, when you're not in the rut, those little 200 acre daily ranges, they're overlapping each other. All right? But when you start getting into the rut, pre-rut, now they're still spending 200 acres, but now we have that, remember the net distance, that displacement? Now that 200 acres they're spending is over here. And the next day, 200 acres is over here.
And that's
So-
the peak and late rut.
That's right. So that's kind of a little understanding of how they're using space.
So they may be in a different place on any given day, but they're moving about the same amount.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
And
that's
that'll
right.
tell you why it's my favorite time to hunt's the late rut. I mean, 100%.
Well, that's when you start seeing those random deer. I
Yeah,
guess.
minus pressure. If you can control the pressure on a place, late rut's where it's at.
And it's never gonna, this is more theoretical on the landscape. There's a lot of gray area overlap and so forth. But to me, I kind of think of it as, if you had a blank slate, you could just create habitat. If you're pairing on a 200, 300, 400 acre scale, I've got quality cover and quality food here. And then I got another 300, 400 acre block over here. Quality cover, quality food. What these data are saying is that basically they're going to each of those and making a circuit going around there. And if you think about it during the rut or pre-rut, at each one of those cover with food areas, there's a doe group.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going
Checking
and
them.
heat checking, and if they're lucky, they're going to tend and breed, and they're going to go to another one, and they're just going to move around opportunistically to where they find does.
Looking for that magical 12 hours.
Yeah.
So I don't have it right here in front of me, but I read your information, and there was one paragraph in there that talked about that quality vegetation, quality forage, and there was a percentage that they were like 10 times more visible. A buck was 10 times more likely to be at an area with quality vegetation and or even a feeder. Y'all listed a feeder in this, as opposed to, I'm not sure what it was opposed to, but I saw that 10 times more likely or 10 times more visible, and that caught my attention. What am I thinking about there?
It could be two things there. So when we were talking about the different habitats, and it's we called it selection strength, and what essentially that means is you're trying to come up with, is there a habitat type or somewhere on the landscape that they prefer to spend more time? And so do they prefer to spend more time in the pine forest, prefer to spend more time in the bottomland hardwoods, et cetera? You're probably talking about, Bobby, cool season food plots.
Specifically, yes.
Yeah, that's where. And so what that means by when we have that metric of selection strength, that means that if something is very rare on the landscape, the acres of it is very rare, but they're spending a disproportionate amount of time there, that tells us this is where they want to be. Mm-hmm. They are making a concerted effort to spend a lot of time here. Just to give you a general example, if I'm making something up, if pine forests represented 50% of the landscape and deer spent 50% of their time in a pine forest, then that would mean there's no selection for it. They're just using it at random. But if something is very rare on the landscape and they're spending a lot of time there, that means they're selecting for it. And that was food plots, more so than feeders.
Yeah.
Food plots.
Oh, yeah.
Cool and warm season.
Yeah, and on this, Dudley, so there might be some confusion there. It's like, why is it warm season food plots in the hunting season? So you have some of these plots where it could still be standing grain, right? Mm-hmm. So it could be corn or beans. And then also some of these plots was deer vetch, and so left standing. And so on these properties, they were doing what we recommend, is that a warm season plot is a warm season plot. Cool season is cool season. We're not plowing up our warm to convert it. So some of those warm season plots during deer season are providing food, and some of them are even providing cover. So there was still a lot of selection for those during the hunting season.
That's good to know.
Would that be, just looking at your figures here, figure 24 and 25, what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yes, exactly. And then we broke it down by day or night. So if you look at 25, 24 is 24-hour period. 25 is just looking at the difference in selection day at night. And of course, they're selecting for food plots more at night than they are during the day. Mm-hmm. But some of that is just related to things we can influence as hunters, is how you hunt those. Don't pressure them too much.
Here's the sentence that struck. Thank you, Richie, for pointing. I couldn't find it. So it says I'm on page 18. It says, on a per acre basis, adult bucks are 10 times more likely to visit sites with a feeder and 5 times more likely to visit sites within a food plot than areas of natural vegetation types. Therefore, hunters who choose locations between areas of vegetative cover and areas of deer forage, such as food plots or feeders, may experience increased success in harvesting adult bucks. So that I kind of keyed in on that paragraph because the harvesting adult bucks was,
it's what you like to do.
Yeah. So I guess it's speaking the language that we all kind of feel and understand and love, and managing your property and doing things to enhance it. But so it's what I'm taking away from this is they respond to that.
Absolutely. I call a good food plot. Now, you can only do what you can do with the amount of area you have and so forth. But I mean, a really good 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acre food plot providing a lot of food. It becomes a focal area of your property. And I don't mean that deer are on it 24/7, but it is going to be a place that is within their home range that they are always going to be going to. I mean, it's kind of little magnets of deer activity on the landscape. The data are very clear about that.
So let's push from that and then go into hunter pressure and how these animals respond when somebody's putting pressure on them. What did y'all learn there?
Well, the thing that we did not find was that there was not this clear defined, when hunting pressure is really, really tough, deer go to X. We didn't see that. Deer are always going to go to the bottomland hardwood. Deer are always going to go to the upland. We really didn't see any, really reliable change. And so working with our movement ecologists that are helping us analyze these data, kind of the way it was explained is there are all these patterns where deer are showing a preference to be when there's no hunting pressure. But when the hunting pressure is on, it means that it's every buck for himself. There's no population level pattern of deer across the board are going to shift and move to this or that. It means that every buck kind of figures out, I know I can go here and be safe, or I can go there and be safe. They're all just not going to a particular cover type. They just know where the risky places are on the landscape. They know where the safe places are on the landscape. And it could be, some of them may be in hardwood, some of them may be in pine, some of them may be on a grown-up fence row. But they know where these safe spaces are at.
It would be interesting, instead of putting a GPS collar on the deer, or leave the GPS collar on the deer, but make people carry their phones with the location on, or track the hunters over the course of a season. Y'all may have done this.
They'd run out of batteries on me.
But just to see how the deer respond to where people go.
So two things. Steve did that with colleagues in Oklahoma well over a decade ago. And they found a lot of good things like that. It was different than this study because they had distinct areas, treatment areas. This was a control with no hunting. This was a very low hunting. This was a high hunting. And what they found out with that, in that high hunting, you got about 3 days. You got about 3 days of where seeing, hearing, smelling, hunters, humans, they start changing that behavior. And the biggest behavioral change wasn't total distance moved during the day. It was the tortuosity. They still had to move to acquire food, but they would do it in a very confined, zigzagging space versus exposing themselves with big linear movements. So that's kind of point one. Point two would be figure 23. We're kind of also doing that, Dudley, where we ran the habitat analysis on the hunters.
Okay.
And so where were hunters selecting to hunt is exactly as you would predict.
Yeah.
They hunt on food plots.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
Now, that's good. I mean, so we just talked about how reliable it is that deer are coming to food plots. But I guess what I'm thinking and saying here, can we be a little more smart how we hunt the food plots so the deer aren't making that a risky area for them?
Sure.
Or only showing up at night.
Sure.
That's all.
You've got to play that
100%.
wind.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to get in and get out, not be seen, not be smelled. Got to.
Yeah.
And just because you want to go hunt that food plot, I mean, you go to bed on Friday night. You can look at Laney's got a $20 app. I got a
$20 app.
I got a free app, and it tells me what the wind is probably going to be doing in the morning. And then when I get to where I'm going, I'll check the wind, and it oftentimes is not that app lies.
And so,
to me. But my point is, you can lay there in bed and say, I'm going to go hunt the big bottom field tomorrow. But tomorrow, the wind may be wrong for the big bottom field, and you're better off to not go there. You're better off to maybe not even go hunting. Go do something and save it for when the wind is right. My advice.
I completely agree. And I'm just thinking of how every deer season, you've all experienced it, where you're like, dadgummit, we need to stand for an east wind.
Yeah.
And it's so rare to have an east wind, but it
gonna
will
happen.
happen every year. Yeah.
Happened last weekend.
Yeah.
Sure did. Well, this is pretty. Did any mature bucks just go nocturnal?
We could have a particular buck for a particular day. They may have not start moving until right at sunset, but Bobby, 99.9% of the time, they are on their feet before sundown and still on their feet at sunrise.
Interesting.
So we just never saw, even at like at an individual level, buck, whatever, 27, we never ever saw that once hunting season began, or even like when gun season began, he was never up and at 'em during daylight. We never saw that.
How long are they laying in a bed?
Some of them would. We are quantifying that literally right now, Bobby. In a couple months, I'm going to be able to give you an exact number with a confidence interval around it. So I'm just going to give you some anecdotes of me looking at. There were some instances of a particular buck I remember, let's say an hour after sunup. So first light, you might have seen that buck, and then he went and found his bed. He laid there the entire day until 30 minutes before, or, around sunset, 30 minutes before sunset, and he got up on his feet. But then we have some bucks that they're not staying there but a couple of hours. Now, they're not getting up for a bona fide movement bout halfway across the property, but they'll get up and forage a little bit and then bed back down. So a lot of variation there.
So from your days of with the pens over at Mississippi State, is a deer kind of like us? He's gonna lay down and he's gonna chew his cud. He's gonna lay there, but eventually he's gonna lay his head completely down and close his eyes. And is he gonna try to get 8 hours of sleep, or is he just getting a few hours? I mean, I just have a hard time picturing one laying there with his eyes closed.
Yeah.
But is that what happens? Though?
Well, that's not the norm. That's not the norm. They will put their head down sometimes, and sometimes it'll be, kind of curled up, and they will close their eyes, but it's not like us going into deep REM sleep. I mean, they can be awoken, within a second. I think it's like how us humans, we say, I'm just going to rest my eyes for a few minutes.
They're still listening for trouble.
Yeah.
And smelling, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wanted to ask the same question, so I'm glad you asked that. But then I'll be like, maybe everybody already knows that.
Well, I've never seen a deer sleep.
I've never seen a deer sleep either. I've definitely seen them bedded with their head down, looking at me. But I've never. Like I knew it
when I lived in
walk over there. He's TKO'd.
When I lived in Montgomery, there was a guy that it was in Macon County, Alabama. He said he climbed up in his stand, and when he got situated, he was kind of looking around, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And he could see a big buck about 60 yards away, curled up like a dog, and his rack was laying on its side. And he could have easily killed it, but he thought it was dead. I mean, he went through all these. Is it asleep? It never moved, and he just kept sitting there watching this deer. And he said, all of a sudden, it just kind of picked its head up, and it was just there, and then it stood up, and he just ended up missing the deer. But he had watched it for
been there too long. Yeah, I've been thinking about it too long.
But that's the only time I can remember somebody actually seeing one asleep.
Yeah, and it's probably a difficult sight to see, just because usually when they're bedding down, they're in some kind of cover. It's going to be difficult to see from the stand.
Yeah.
Y'all were just on a hunt with Mac. Wasn't that deer bedded down for hours and y'all watched him?
Yeah, he bedded down. So it was roughly about noon when he was with the doe, and he bedded down, and then we put a stalk on him, and he would lay down all total about 3 hours before he got up.
Yeah. And did you ever see him put his head down? I know y'all
see
keep tracking him with his horns.
we could see it. That's the thing. We could see his antlers there every now and then pop up a little bit, like he was getting up, scratching himself. That was cleaning himself or something like that. We could see his antlers there move around there in the tall grass.
So he's like you said, something like he was over a catnapping.
Yeah.
A little bit. So it probably began with ruminating. After his feeding bout, he ruminated, chewed his cud, did that half hour, whatever. And then maybe he just decided to, shut his eyes for a little
Just
bit.
a second.
Being a biologist and getting to study these things, what a neat animal to study. You picked, in my mind, just the pinnacle of wild animals in North America.
They are so enchanting, that's for sure.
I agree. And then to be able to chase them and hunt them, that's what makes it so fun.
Yeah.
Is it's not just asking biology questions. It's how it relates to management, how it relates to hunting.
Yeah.
Hopefully coming up with educational material that helps explain what people are seeing. That's a lot of fun and really
That's pretty
gratifying.
cool. No doubt about it.
I think you're one of the smartest guys I've ever met when it comes to talking to you about whitetails. And I think a guy listening to this, I don't want anybody to be confused, but I think you can really learn that there's things that between your words that a guy can glean out.
Yeah, you can learn
Mr. Know-It-All.
from especially hunting highly pressured deer. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we know that they're still going to get up and move. They may not move far, but they're going to zigzag around and eat. Even if they're hunted heavily on public ground and all that, they're still going to get up and move around. They just may not move a long distance.
They've got to eat every day.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you say I know you don't have much experience with 220-pound animals like
222.
but that deer or the deer that you killed, what do you weigh? 150? You said something.
180.
How much dry matter would that deer eat in a day? 7 or 8 pounds? Just give me just a rough.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, I'd say more like 5, 6, 7.
That's-
Dry, removing the water weight.
yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And you think about that every day that's coming off the landscape. Multiply that times however many deer
You ought to
got there.
look at the, because we did this years ago. My gosh, a long time. But we actually went to Walmart and went like in their little floral section or whatever and got a whole bunch of fake vegetation. I'm not coming up with the right word, but the plastic flowers.
Oh, yeah.
You put them on
100%.
people's graves.
Yeah.
Lanny,
I know exactly what you're
But
talking
we got the same amount of that of what it would be if you removed the water to come up with this 2 to 3% dry matter intake every day a deer has. Okay,
So the volume equivalent.
rather than us going out in the woods with clippers and clipping it up, we just went and did that. So it would be something we could have at workshops and demonstrate. And so Steve has a tub set up for a 100-pound doe and a tub set up for a 200-pound buck. And it's difficult to comprehend the amount of vegetation that, I mean, you can barely hold it with both arms. That's how much food they are eating every single day. And then you start thinking about every single day and how many deer, give or take, you have on your property. You need to manage your habitat and you need to grow a lot of groceries for them to be in good condition.
Yeah.
That's I was looking at these graphs, and that's why I get so sad when I see a poorly managed pine plantation.
Yeah.
A timber type, managed for timber only. There's really no food there.
Nothing
I mean,
there.
a lot of hardwoods are the same,
Right.
certain times of the year. And
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, think about how quickly they can eat a food plot to the ground if you don't have a lot of good food in the woods.
That's right.
So Bronson, in the last few weeks, and I've had a number of people ask me to ask you this. There are people at processors or people at the skinning rack are saying,
Oh,
look at
yeah.
all the fat on this deer. The deer are telling me or the deer know it's going to be a really rough winter by all the fat that they have. And I don't want to.
And compare it to the drought. You know, we've had 100-year drought in this area.
But I mean, is that factual, or is it because there's a really good acorn crop right there in that area? Maybe those deer put on some. And then I see people make a comment like, "Well, so now deer are looking into they're able to look into the future." I mean that they're. But what's going on?
Have you seen any of that? People making that comment recently that, you know, despite the insane drought we had, folks are saying that a lot of the deer have way more fat than normal at the skinning rack this year.
That is, I would say, that is a deer being opportunistic when they have an opportunity available to them. In this case, mast or acorns, they're going to take advantage of it. And the interesting thing about acorns and fat is that, remember, an acorn is not providing a lot of protein. It is carbohydrates. And so that is something easy to convert into fat. And so I've also been on properties where the mast crop was terrible or non-existent, but they had a really, really, really good warm season food plot program and managing habitat, and they had an inch of fat on their rear end. So, I mean, it's just them responding to the best food that is available. And that is just built-in survival mechanism. You take advantage of the best food that you have, because there will be a time come February where there's not a lot of food and they're going to be burning that fat.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I skinned 5 this morning, and 1 out of 5 had an inch of fat on it.
So
all comes from the same place.
So
yeah, we just saw a lot of folks making that.
Yeah, and it got some people that don't know a lot about deer asking questions. So they know that it's going to be bad.
They know it's going to be a cold winter. No,
No.
I think it's just like you said, just luck of the draw. People are.
Yeah.
So it seemed like I'm also lately, and this is probably Lindsey Thomas, our friend Lindsey Thomas, probably has a lot to do with it, but I'm seeing a lot of people looking at kidney fat and basing the health of their animal on that. I found that very interesting as well, because that's relatively new to me as a consumer. It may not be new to you as a biologist, but is that kind of newish, a new thing y'all are teaching people to do?
Yeah, and that's something I worked with Craig Harper about a year or 2 ago now, and we developed an extension publication on harvest data analysis and management and all that. So we went into great detail about the kidney fat index measurement. But essentially, this is what's great about it, is I recommend for people that are serious about it, is I want the body weight of the deer. Of course, I want the body weight of the deer. I want some measure of the condition of the deer. Condition means fat. So now you can do that 2 ways. Give me either a poor, medium, good. Good meaning, holy moly, look at all this fat. I can grab a handful of fat. But that's just a relatively crude measurement. The best measurement is what biologists have been using for decades, and that is the kidney fat index. And the index is simply the ratio of the weight of the kidney and the fat that's around it. So you literally grab your gut in the deer, you grab that kidney, and all the fat that's encapsulating the kidney, you pull that out, you pull the fat off of it, and you weigh that fat, and then you weigh the kidney. If they are about the same, then that is really, really good. And usually there's a strong correlation. If they have very little body fat, they're going to have very little kidney fat as well. So the beauty of it is, for me as a number cruncher, when I'm keeping up with data, I have a number with kidney fat index versus they had a little fat on them, they had a lot of fat on them. It's just hard to quantify that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That is interesting. You start looking at the kidneys.
I'm going to have to start looking at the kidneys.
I think this is the coolest deer podcast we've done yet.
Could be.
I think so.
Yeah. This data is pretty amazing, and I will. I'm interested to learn things to help science take away this old folklore ways of thinking and learn what's really going on. And that's fascinating to me.
Make you a better hunter and a manager. Follow the science.
Yeah. Well, we preach being a gamekeeper, and when I read through this, and when you talk about quantitatively, you guys prove that they want to be in these better habitats.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a real important takeaway right there.
It's hugely interesting. One of the most interesting thing is you brought it up. Our cameras, we say, they're not moving. Is he daylighting? Is he daylighting? He's daylighting somewhere.
That's right.
You know what I mean? That's what this study says.
Yeah.
I mean, you just not looking for him in the right
he may
spot.
not be in front of your feeder
Yeah.
that you've got your camera on.
Yeah, but he is up and at him somewhere. It's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then those deer that we didn't even know anything about showing up.
Yeah.
And then your deer, where'd he go? He's gone.
Yeah.
It's they are really interesting.
That's what's the best thing about it. You never learn it all, that's for sure.
One thing too, one other little nugget I've been thinking a lot about too is, in a lot of managed properties, number one, this is very fun to do. Number two, management wise, it's really important. We're all running cameras and we're all coming up with our inventory. These are for sure the bucks we don't want harvested. These are the ones we can, etc. And then you may have a guess. Please don't shoot this one. Please shoot this one. But because of these excursions, you also still have to be prepared to age bucks on the hoof.
100%.
Because you might just get one shot at it. You may never see, the buck may never be on your property again except for today. So still empower yourself with, that buck is old enough and relative to the antler size, I want to shoot or not. Because there will be instances where even though if you ran a camera every 5 acres on your property, there will be instances where you do not get a photo.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing an excursion, you got him for one day, and he's gone.
Well, Lanny just ground checks them. But you're absolutely right. The more a guy learns, the better off he is.
No doubt about
it. And everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, we've been going a while. We've got a trivia question we want to ask you real quick, and I think this is a good one. Dr. Michael Chamberlain put this question together, and
your bro, Michael Chamberlain.
Let's see what kind of bro he is.
Just be prepared, Mike. I'm going to see how you treat me, and I'll return the favor.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Richie now.
Oh,
Today's trivia is brought to us by Sheffield Financial, because your finances are not trivial.
There we go. Sheffield.
I think Bobby wants me to work on that.
I do want you to work on that. I think we can improve that. Sheffield is a much better company than that intro actually is.
I love it. Do you even know what that is?
You know what that is?
It sounds like maybe you're dropping a quarter into the...
You don't know what song that is?
A slot machine. Is that what you think?
Is that a song?
That is a song. Start of a song.
Well, it's not the exact song.
Oh, my bad.
But
BMI.
Yeah.
Scratch that.
No, it was a remix that I did. That's what it was.
You made it your own.
Yeah. So we're playing here for CK Squared Farms.
Okay, let me think about this now.
All right.
CK Squared. Could that be Calvin
Klein?
Could that be?
Maybe it is. Speaking of,
I don't know. I'm just saying, CK.
He might know a CK.
You think Calvin's in the hunting?
I don't know, but if he does have a hunting place, I would love to go visit it.
Yeah. Could be.
All right, well,
sorry, Bronson.
Their remark here, I love the information and value you all passed on through this platform. If you're looking for a podcast stuff full of hunting and conservation information, look no further.
How about that? Yeah. Thank you, CK.
All right.
What's the prize?
The prize is 2 dog-proof Duke traps.
Hey.
Did you find yours the other day, Bobby?
No.
What happened to you?
Somebody around here has stolen.
I gave you a tip.
I know, but I hadn't located them yet. So I got to do that because I got to be ready when the time comes.
That's right. It's coming too.
All right. Again, this question's from our friend Dr. Mike Chamberlain. Although Leopold is often considered the nation's first wildlife biologist, and he's the one that got the wildlife management movement started, but many people that have heard of him do not know that he was actually a professor, the nation's first professor of wildlife management. What year did Leopold become the first professor of wildlife management?
Man, that's tough.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's
So
not
it's
like
pretty-
where did he
Yeah.
teach?
Not
or
even
something?
like the
What-
book or
what
something.
year?
What
Yeah, I
year?
thought he was
year?
going to say what university. I'm like, all right, I got that
yeah,
one.
That year's he narrowed it
Dad
down.
gum.
What
It's,
university would it be?
University of Wisconsin.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a bonus, I guess. So what year?
He's probably giggling over there.
I can't-
somewhere
Yeah,
in
I'm sure he
Georgia.
is.
I can throw you a hint here. 4 years before the Pittman-Robertson Act was signed.
So that would be 33.
Oh my goodness!
He killed it.
Way to go!
So Pittman Robertson was 37.
1937.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
How about that? You got it, Bronson.
Got
I know
it,
my
Bronson.
Pittman Robertson.
Hey, last thing before you leave, you've just always been so good to us, and
He
this-
was our first podcast guest.
He is. He really was. So
What?
This is pass this down, Dudley. This
This-
is
I don't,
a bottomland hoodie,
This
Nice.
thing is the most comfortable.
and you know,
here, I'll let you unveil it
All
Oh,
right.
yeah,
for the camera.
What are we doing? Oh, has it got something on?
well, it does. It does. It's
Look at there.
there. You go.
That is awesome.
So it's a Mississippi State bottomland hoodie, and we just appreciate you coming over
Thank
here
you.
whenever we call. And
Got the
And,
old school
And we
logo.
call often.
I will be wearing that over Christmas break.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been fun. I think this is. I'm like Dudley. This has been very informative.
Love it. I mean, this is what we set out to do. I mean, it really is to help.
Don't forget
everything about it.
Yeah.
the stocking stuffer opportunity here with
Oh,
this publication.
I'm
this is actually
serious.
a good idea.
Yeah.
Not too late.
This belongs in a binder in your collection of books that have anything to do with wildlife and the outdoors.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. So, Dr. Bronson Strickland, we appreciate you coming. We want to have you back. You've got some things going on in your future, and we want to talk to you about that. But,
Yeah.
But right now, we want to make this will come out after Christmas. So, guys, y'all have a good New Year's. Y'all be safe. Don't do anything crazy. I'm looking at Lanny when I say that. Don't stay out.
It's going to
all
be a
night
full
on-
moon.
Yeah, you know what? It could be. But we've learned that shouldn't affect.
Just
It
a few
affects
of us.
people like Lanny, just not the
just a
general
few of us.
population.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, it's been good. Thanks everybody for being here, and we're looking forward to 2024 being.
Guys, crazy. We're here. 2024.
Yeah, sure is. So, why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.